With the release of the RTX 3050 and the 6500 XT, the world of what I might consider worthwhile budget PCs has once again become a reality. Now, I know what everyone's version of what the word budget means is fluid, but for today, we are going to focus on budgets between $800 and $1,000 for PC parts and components, no tax or anything weird like that. Now, a space that in both the PC DIY and pre-built space has been littered with the 16 series of NVIDIA GPUs or the 500 series of AMD GPUs. Dated and aged cards that we felt weren't worth spending the money on, and it was truly best to either save or, heaven forbid, invest in a console. Now, if you want to see my review on the RTX 3050, you can check that out right here. Well, with the cards out and reviews in the bag, we here at Robeytech took the time to spec out a build that we feel and are confident about any person building in this price range would be happy with. Not only did we spec it out, but when we built it, we also built it with an in-depth step-by-step guide, which is in this video, and we benchmarked it to boot. Oh, and we're giving one of these away. So how did it all go? Well, let's find out right here, right now on Robeytech. So I did want to jump in here real quick and do a couple things before we get into the step-by-step guide. Number one, this video is meant as a guide, which means you can jump throughout it with no problems just by using the links down in the table content, so that way you can move back and forth and repeat whatever steps you want. Also, we're giving the PC away, but if you want to know how to do that, make sure you stay tuned until the end of the video so you can find out all the details on how you can win one of these awesome PCs. We're also going to be giving $50 away to one lucky person down in the comments who leaves an amazing comment. And this can be positive or negative feedback, but we always are looking for ways to improve. So if you want to do that, leave a comment down below. Now make sure you leave a way for us to get a hold of you inside of your YouTube profile. Also, you have to be able to accept Vimeo and PayPal. It's open worldwide. And the other thing too is that you just need to make sure that you also are liked and subscribed. Anyway, guys, we're going to jump into the step-by-step. We hope you really enjoy this video. The build that I'm going to make is a little bit over $1,000. In fact, I do have the $1,000 version. There's very little change, but you know me, I'm an aesthetic clean guy. So we added a couple little things just to bring it up aesthetically, but they're completely optional if you want to keep that $1,000 price point. And I'll highlight those as we walk through. Now let's start with the biggest part here, which is the P360A. This is a case from Fantex. It is a budget airflow case. Absolutely fantastic. Love this case. You can check out a review on that whole thing right here. But one of the things I like about it comes with 2 RGB fans, so you get a little bit of that look already. Very, very easy to build in, and just enough case to fit what you need for this particular build. So let's set that aside, and then we'll walk through the other parts as well. So for our CPU, we're using the Intel 12th Gen 12600K. Now you might be saying, Robey, why not like a 5600X or whatever it was? Hey, honestly, this is just kind of the chip to choose. It is a beast at $299. It's 10 cores, of which you get 6 P cores and 4 E cores. And you get all of the thread director and a bunch of things that just are gonna make a big difference if you're building a new PC, both for gaming and for productivity at the same time. So love this CPU. You get PCIe Gen 5, you get all of the bells and whistles for upgradability, and you get it right off of the bat. So that's our CPU. For cooling the CPU, just to make sure that we're good, we actually went with the Chromax. This is the Noctua NH12US. If you wanted to save a little bit of money, you can actually go down to the brown version, and that's going to keep your costs a little bit lower. Absolutely phenomenal cooler. The good thing is that if you were deciding to upgrade to like a 12700K later on or something like this cooler could still manage it. For our storage, we're going to use the Intel 670p 1TB NVMe SSD. These have a tendency to be sub $100 for 1TB. It's their latest technology in terms of TLC, so good reliability, great for gaming, great for operating system and all that sort of stuff. But it's just an overall great workhorse, middle of the road NVMe SSD. For our motherboard, we're going to be using the Tough Gaming B660M Plus. This is the 12th Gen B660 board. One thing I like about it, it's got an integrated I/O shield, so it's going to save you there. It has a lot of really nice bells and whistles. You got PCIe Gen 5. It's a great looking board, and at the same time, it still has 4 DIMMs, so should you want to upgrade your RAM and all that sort of stuff, you've got that. If you're going to do something like streaming or whatever, maybe going to an ATX version of this board, but again, really the focus on this one is just kind of gaming, and you are going to use an external capture card like a 4K 60S Plus. So there is our motherboard. For our power supply, we're going to be using a 650 G6. So this is the latest version from EVGA. You could go down to a G5. The setup is going to be very much the same. So again, anything in the EVGA spectrum all the way up to an 850 and down in the step-by-step guide is going to be entirely the same. So feel free to move up and down in your range for this one. But this is a much smaller power supply, a lot easier in terms of cable management. It's got their newer technology and it's gold rated, which with the 3050 is going to be more than good enough in terms of getting that efficiency, which is great. But if you think that you might want to upgrade, you may want to jump up to a 750 or even an 850 or even a 1000 watt if you think you're going to be able to pair, because you can pair all the way up to a 3080 with a 12600K and not have any issues whatsoever. For our GPU, and I just released the review for this one, and you're probably seeing this the next week after the review. It's the EVGA GeForce 3050. So this one is from EVGA. The one thing I love about this card is just how much performance, and for $250. You get DLSS, you get NVEC encoding, you get all of the bells and whistles, plus it is just a great GPU even at 1440. And that is both gaming and streaming. Finally, something worth doing, and that's why we're building this video today. Couple visual options that I've added. Asia Horse sleeve cables, $26. They make a massive difference in terms of how good things look. Such a cheap and inexpensive visual upgrade. Lastly, we're going to be using a Fantex SK120 RGB fan. If you wanted to just choose an inexpensive Corsair NZXT 120mm non-RGB fan, you could totally do that. It would probably end up costing you $5-6 versus the $13.99 that something like this costs. But given that I get that little bit, and then now I can customize the look and visual state of my PC, that's why I'm going to go ahead and do this. And by the way, one part I forgot, ladies and gentlemen, and it wouldn't be a Robeytech video without some mistake, is our RAM. In this case, we're using T-Force DDR4 3200 megahertz, 16 gigs at 2x8 in a CL16 configuration. Now, no, it's not DDR5. Yes, it's more than fast enough for anything you're going to do, and it gives you the opportunity to add another 16 gigs if you wanted to. Should be more than fine for gaming and streaming should you want to do it. Wanted to add that in there. Need RAM. That is all the parts that we're putting inside of this $1,000 PC. Now let's talk about the things that you're going to need in order to do your own build coming up next. The first thing you need when you build, before you do anything else, is a nice big open area to build your PC just like this. This is a Robeytech build mat, which you can check out. Actually, we have a link down in the description below if you want to build one just like this. Now let's talk about the things you may need when you're actually building a PC. Now some things are for sure, and I'll definitely highlight those, but there are some potential things that are just going to save you time should you get into that part of building that might just be nice to have. So starting here on the left, obviously scissors. They're nice to have, and we've used them in almost every single build. Cable cutters that I use for basically cutting the ends off of zip ties. Really like these. And by the way, links for all this stuff is down in the description below. Now let's talk about screwdrivers. And there's a number of options that I have right here. I have the same one that I used in the last step-by-step guide, which 2.3 million of you watched. This may be the only screwdriver you need, but the one other thing that I like to do, also have on hand, is just a standard screwdriver with a really long neck. Having something like this just on hand as an optional device may come in handy.
I fix it.
This actually adds a lot of versatility specifically for building. Again, all you really need is one of the first screwdrivers that I showed you, but this just has a lot of additional heads that can make a big difference for basically doing things.
I fix it.
Now let's talk about cable management. Now you have two options, and it's divisive. People fight about this stuff, but you've got the zip tie, which is option Robeytech, or the Velcro, which is option lots of other people. Whichever option you choose is totally fine, but if you are going to get cable zip ties, then making sure that you have these little snips is going to be a big thing for you. The greatest thing is we're using Noctua in this build, and Noctua comes with Noctua thermal paste, which is one of the top rated thermal pastes. But if you're going to choose something else, say for instance you decided to go an alternative or off script on this Robeytech step-by-step guide, just make sure that you get some high quality thermal paste. The Noctua one is the one that I definitely recommend. The other one is like the Arctic Silver or the Cremique from Arctic are really great thermal paste. I use a thermal paste spreader. Having something like this to be able to spread it can be nice, and therefore you're guaranteeing that you're getting adequate cooling across the top of your CPU. So nice little add-on, not necessary, but definitely something I recommend. If you make a mistake when spreading thermal paste, or you bought a different cooler and you need to remove the stuff that's already on it, isopropyl alcohol, and paper towels. You're going to be opening a lot of plastic, you're going to be opening a lot of boxes and plastic seals, so having a knife handy or scissors, depending on which one. I just find knives being way more effective in terms of just being able to cut through things. So having a knife just handy for being able to do that stuff is actually really, really nice. So having a knife is a bonus. The first thing we're going to do when we build our PC is we're going to build our motherboard completely. So the things that you'll need for this particular section of the build is you'll need your B660 motherboard. If you chose something differently, that's completely okay. Just go ahead and make sure that you have that out. If it's ATX that you bought, like a B660 ATX motherboard, and it's also an Asus like the Z690, you can follow along with this exactly the same. There is no issue whatsoever. It will be almost entirely the same instructions. You'll also need your CPU cooler. In this case, we have our Noctua NH-U12S Black that we'll be using. You'll need your NVMe SSD. In this case, we have our 670p, but if you chose something different, totally okay. The setup instructions will be absolutely identical. And then, of course, you need your CPU. If you chose a 12900K, 12700K, 12600K, anything as long as it's a 12th gen Intel, the setup for this will be entirely the same. So if you wanted to move off script for that, that's okay. Let's start with getting our motherboard ready. We are now ready to start putting together our motherboard. We're going to start with installing our CPU. Now the parts that I have out right now is, of course, I have my 12600K out. You're going to take this out. You don't need it right now, but this is your Wi-Fi adapter when you get to set up later on. But I have it out and just wanted to make sure that I highlighted that it was inside of the case should you need it. I'm going to put this off to the side. The other thing too that is always good, especially if you're not using the exact same board that I'm using, is your manual. Inside of this manual is an overview of your motherboard, where all the connections are. So should you get confused or something I mentioned, you can always use this as a reference to go back to. Now, if you have an iFixit kit, this is the time to get it out. iFixit. Feel free to use whatever screwdriver you have. My Noctua thermal paste and my spreader for what we'll cover with the CPU. So let's go ahead and start building.
Finally, Robey, we're gonna build something.
Okay, so let's do a quick walkthrough of the motherboard so that way you just have highlighted and you know where certain parts are. So let's start here in the center. This is our LGA 1700 socket. This is where we're going to be putting in our CPU. Over here next to it, these are your RAM slots, and you can see that they're actually different colors. These are light gray and dark gray. Given that we're going to be only using 2 sticks of RAM, we need to stick it in specific slots, and they're color coded so you know which slots those are. In this case, it's going to be A2 and B2, and we'll be showing you that a little bit later on. This is your 24-pin ATX. This is where basically your main motherboard power comes from. This is a USB 3.2 connection. This is your USB-C. Here you have SATA. You've actually got a total of 4 on this motherboard. You've got 2 here and 2 here. These are our front panel connections. So this is where we're actually going to hook up our power switch, etc. This right here, and you'll see one here, a couple over here, there's another one up here. These are fan headers. In this case, there's only one we really need to worry about, which is our CPU fan, which is right here. And you'll notice it's actually a different color than the rest of it, and that's because this is the only one that will throw an error if we don't plug it in. Here we have our PCIe connectors. You'll notice this is the light gray, this gray one. This is actually where you're going to stick in our graphics card. This is a by 16. You've actually got 2 M.2 slots on here. You've got one underneath the shield, and then you've got a second one right here. And if you'll see right here, this is one of those cool Asus devices that they've added that makes you not have to use M.2 screws. And what you can do is you can just basically set it in and then rotate this around and install this. So this is your BIOS battery. Nothing you have to worry about, but I just want to at least highlight it out. This is your B660 chipset, which is basically the thing that tells the motherboard what to do, adds additional functionality, etc. These right here, these are RGB connections. These are 5 volt. Then over here, this is our EPS connections for our CPU. We're only going to be plugging in the 8-pin, but if at any point in time you want to do some crazy overclocking, you can actually plug in both. And the good thing about it is you have that option should you need to. This is actually called our I/O, and this is an integrated I/O shield. One of the things I really enjoy about this particular motherboard. These are your display ports. You've got USB 3.2, you've got USB 3.2 Gen 2 or USB-C. You've got a 2.5 gig Ethernet, and then you've got your audio and then your Wi-Fi 6 adapter, which is one of the things I really enjoy, and one of the reasons I chose Intel 12th Gen for this $1,000 PC is that there's just a lot of out of the box that you don't have to worry about adding. That just comes with this board that ends up saving you money in the long run. So that is the motherboard in a whole that you need to care about. Let's go ahead and put in our CPU. What you're gonna do is you're gonna take this clip, you're gonna lift it out and lift it up and lift this all the way open. So it's just like that. But when you open the CPU, and just grab it from the side. Now actually on the CPU, you'll see there's two arrows. Those are going to align with an arrow that is actually also on the chip here. So what you do is you're gonna align this arrow with the bottom left-hand corner like so. You're just gonna drop it in. That's all there is to it. And the thing is this will only go one way. If you notice these little dimples, they're only one way that this will go, which is something that's kind of nice. Now, next step you're gonna do, you're gonna push this down and keep pushing until this black thing is gonna pop off. It can go pretty high, so don't freak out. See, that's fun, so fun. You're gonna remove this, and then you're gonna pull this down, like so. It's gonna be a lot of pressure. You're just gonna slip it under, and boom. Now your CPU is installed. So if you look on your motherboard, you'll actually see that on this is a place that says DIMM A1, A2, and then there's little lines, and it's showing you if you only have two DIMMs, where you actually need to install. And in this case, we need to install it in B2, and A2, which are the two light gray places right here. There's a little slot in the PCB, and PCB stands for printed circuit board, which is what this little area is. There's a little slot that lines up with the little slot right here. Now, you want to make sure the sticker is facing this direction. That's how most RAM, you'll know it's the right direction, but just make sure that it lines up. Once you kind of set it in there, then you're going to take both fingers and applying good amount of pressure, push down. Now we're going to do the same thing with this one. Line it up, just like that, and then nice solid. Hopefully you get much better clicks than I did. Those are terrible clicks. Now you couldn't do this with a normal screwdriver. It's a little bit easier with a nice smaller one like what I'm going to use here.
I fix it.
So I'm going to grab a little smaller screwdriver and I'm going to open up both of these up here. Just going to remove that. There's a little slot in the PCB right here. And there's also a little slot here where you're going to connect the M.2. What you're going to do is you're going to take it and you're going to slip it in just like this. And then you know it's all the way. Make sure it's nice and pushed in. You'll know it acts like a diving board. And then you're going to see this little arm right here. You're going to take it and then you're just going to clip it in. No screws, nothing. That's all you got to do. Flip this little heat shield over. So you're going to peel that and then you're going to turn this over. You're going to put it right on top of it and then you're going to re-screw it down. Okay guys, next on my list is thermal paste installation. So you can go inside the cooler. The box that looks just like this, what you're gonna do is open it up, and right in here, in this little bag, you can see inside of it, there is actually thermal paste. You can take that out to do this next step. If you did not purchase your own, it does actually come with the exact same stuff. Back to this, now you're gonna take this, and what you do is you just put a little pea-size amount, about that much is more than enough. Using this particular method, you will get a spread, but it will not cover the entire IHS. The other option that you also have if you want to do something a little bit more, but you might, to make sure you get more coverage, is the X method. It has a tendency to work a lot better for something of this size. But what I'm going to do in my case is I'm going to use my little spreader, and I'm actually just going to make sure that I actually get a good spread. And there you go. You got a nice, super clean covering of thermal paste. Now comes time to put together the cooler. Now, once we finish this, we're more than halfway done with the build, believe it or not. So let's go through the parts that you're going to need here. So I've got them all laid out for you. These are the brackets to install the cooler on. We actually have the cooler itself. These are the parts out of the box you'll need for an LGA 1700, which is the kind of installation we're doing for this air cooler. So you'll need these blue separators, these little fasteners, these little metal pegs, and then of course these screws. So the first thing we're gonna do, we're gonna take this right here, you're gonna take one of these metal fasteners, and then what you're gonna do is you're gonna see there's a little triangle on here, you're gonna set that in, and you're gonna make sure it's on the outside position. So it's gonna be set just like that. So it's in the two. So there's a top one would be for 1500, the bottom one is for 1700, so you wanna make sure the triangle is just like that. And what you're gonna do is you're gonna take one of these little black fasteners, you're just gonna lock it on just like that. And what you're gonna do is you're gonna rinse and repeat around the edge for the rest of these. So again, making sure they're always on the outside, fasten it, just like that. Same thing, always on the outside, fasten it. Just like that, same thing, last one, outside, making sure the triangle's on the outside, just like that, and then fasten it. And when you're done, it's gonna look just like this. Take your motherboard, you're gonna take your little fastener, you're gonna stick it right inside of these holes, just like this. Just goes just like that, see? It sits down, and you're gonna set it right back down. So you're gonna take these little blue things, you're going to set them over each one of the little pegs, like this. Now, on these little metal parts, you can see there's a 1, a 2, and a 3. You want to make sure that the metal pegs are in the 2 position. So again, same thing, putting it on the side, making sure it's on the 2 on both of these. It's in the middle on that one. Same thing here. 2 and 2. There you go, just like that. Take this, you're going to basically lift, same thing with the other side, lift, and then you're going to take the fan off, set it off to the side, and then you're going to take this little metal, make sure you take this off. This is bad if you didn't. Take this off. And you're going to set it just over these little metal pegs right here. Just like that. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take our screwdriver, and starting in the corners, I'm going to tighten these down. You might be saying, Robey, that's out of order. One of the things I'm checking for is I'm making sure that the thing is absolutely centered. If you do it with the cooler off, if you do this with the cooler off, then if it's crooked, you'll put the cooler on, you find out it's crooked. So I have a tendency to set it all up to make sure it's straight beforehand. And I'm not going to tighten these all the way down yet. I'm just going to tighten them enough. And then once I get them all on, then I'll tighten them all the way down. So I'm just going to go into each corner and get till it's close to stopping, and then I'll go around and finish it out. Just make sure they're pretty much just nice and tight. Nothing too crazy. You don't want to over torque anything when you install anything on a motherboard. There we go. Last one. Okay, so there you go. That's good. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to screw this down. I'm just going to kind of start it. So do like 3 or 4 twists, you'll hear it catch. Go to the other side and do the exact same thing. Okay, and then I'm going to tighten this one all the way down once I've got it started. And go until it stops. Go, it stops. Same thing on the other side. Go until it stops. Boom. It stopped. Everything's centered. I'm going to take my fan. I'm going to set it on the front. Then you see these clips. You just want to pull the clips back over till it grips. Really easy. And then you want to take this connection right here. You want to take this. You want to connect it in a light gray one. Right there. Okay? There you go. Now our motherboard is done. It's time to prep our case for getting set up. So what we're going to do is we're going to remove this top dust filter, just set it aside. And here in the back, 2 thumb screws. just come out, they're captive, which means they don't come out. Just go out like that and then do a pull. Just a nice release, very simple. With the front, same thing. Couple thumb screws. There's actually a little lift or holder right here. Just gonna pull it out and then lift it off. Straightforward there. Now, in the front, there's a pull. Just gonna pull like that. It's gonna pop right out, just like that. And down here at the bottom is your little extra pieces. So this is your accessories. You're gonna wanna take this out. You can slide that right back in. Now, we're not installing any hard drives or anything like that, but if you wanted to, this is where you'd put them. We're going to take out our bag of screws, which is included. It's because we're not using ATX, we're using a micro ATX motherboard. We actually do have to change the standoffs inside of the case. Now, if you bought an iFixit kit,
iFixit,
there's basically a 0.5, it says 0.5 on it, it looks just like this. Or you can use a wrench like this. So what we're going to do is down at the bottom, there's actually 3. We only need 2 of these. So we're going to go ahead and take these off. Now, what I'm going to do, I'm going to take the exact same little standoff, and over here, right below this other one, I'm going to screw it in. So there's that one, and then you're going to take the next one, you're going to screw it in right here in this bottom slot right here. Just like that. You're just going to tighten it just a little bit, and there you go. Now it is screwed in, and you are good to go. And on here is a peel. So you see it right here, just holding it like this, just go ahead and peel that off. Make sure that's all the way off, like so. Go ahead and set it down. And then just slide it all the way over. And there's a little peg here in the center that kind of is like a peg and also a screw hole. Now what we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead and screw everything in. So inside of your bag of screws are these screws right here, and they have a little lip around them. There's 22 of them. They're called motherboard SSD screws, and you're going to use a total of 8 of them. There's going to be 3 on the top, 3 in the middle, and then 2 at the bottom. So just follow along with me. We're gonna get these screwed in real quick. If you're gonna use an SK120, then grab your SK120 right now. Or if you just bought a less inexpensive fan, grab that as well. We'll show you how to hook both of them up. They're gonna be almost entirely, they're gonna be the exact same in terms of hooking it up. And then I'm gonna set it in just like this. And then just screw in your 4 screws. You're gonna take these cables and you're gonna thread them through this little hole right here. If you are using an RGB fan, you want to take this connection and the other one from the other fan, and you want to connect those together. This is just to make sure that now these fans are daisy chained together. Now what we're going to do is we're going to run all of our front panels to the right locations. The first one we're going to do is, this is our first fan. It's off of the back fan. You're going to take this cable and you're going to stick it in this hole right here. Okay? Now down here at the bottom is all of our other cables, and don't worry, we're going to tell you what to do with every single one of them. So the first cable we're going to grab is this big blue one. It's our USB 3.2 cable. We're going to take this one and we're going to shove it right into this little slot right here, which is the second one down. Just going to stick it in just like that. Then what we're going to do is we're going to take our HD audio cable. We're going to stick that in the far right. And then we're also going to take this one, which is our RGB. You're also going to stick this one in the far right. And then what you're going to do is you're going to take the longest fan header and you're going to stick that in the far right little hot slot in the bottom. Then you're going to take this little cable, it says power switch on it, just like this, and you're going to stick this in this big gap in the front. You're going to take this other one, this other shorter fan cable, and you're also going to stick it in this big gap in the front, just like that. And then all of our cables are essentially routed and ready to go. So we're going to flip this case over, and hopefully none of the cables fall out. If they do, just pay attention. Now you have all your cables sticking out just like so. The first thing we're gonna do is our 3.2. Make sure you go at a 90-degree angle. It's gonna go right here, just like that. Then for our power switch, making sure the power switch is up, 2 from the left, right next to it, just like that. First fan header, our shortest fan, take that, make sure the bottom clip is down, and you're gonna put it right here. Just like that. This one is our RGB for all of our fans. You're gonna take that and our little light bar. Take that, and it's gonna go right here. Same with this one. This is our fan header. It's gonna go right here, just like that. Then finally, HD, we've got our filled pin at the top. Go right here. Cool. So I'm going to show you little things that I would do if I was doing this build for me as a cable manager. So if you want to do the same thing, if you don't, that is completely okay. This is completely an option. This is optional for you. But these are just things that I do to make it look nice. So if you want to follow along, great. If not, you do you, baby. So we're just going to do a little bit of cleanup for zip ties. I'm going to use 4 zip ties here. A little bit of cable management done back here if you want. Just leave the rat's nest if you want to as well. Okay, so we have a cable managed build. You just want to have something nice and clean in the back. Up to you if you want to do this or not. The only thing I would definitely recommend is this lower portion if you want to just kind of push things over and leave them unconnected, just so it makes it a whole lot easier to get your PSU in. Okay, so we're installing the GPU. The only things we need are a screwdriver and of course our GPU. Now if there's any plastic things that are on it, make sure that you take those off. Over here, you'll actually see that we have a cover for our I/O shield. What you want to do is you want to unscrew that and remove the thumb screws altogether. It's just a lot easier. I know you don't have to, but I will tell you it just becomes a whole lot easier to install the GPU. So remove those and set those off to the side. And then what you want to do is you see this is the slot where we're going to be installing the GPU. You can kind of follow it over and you want to see that given I'm going to do 2 slots, I'm going to remove this one and this one. Just unscrew them. There's 1. And there is 2. Just go and remove those just like that. And then set those off to the side. Don't throw these away. It's always a good idea to save them. And you see this little slot right here? This is going to line up just along this slot, the same. So you're just going to make sure that this lines all the way up with the 2 holes here on the left, and right at the top. So it's just lined up just like that, and just give it a nice push. And it'll give it usually a pretty good snap. Sometimes it might be quiet, but just good solid snap to make sure it's snug all the way in. Take our screws, screw in these 2 spots. Then lastly, take your cover, place it back, and there we go. If you are not going to use cable extensions, you can skip to the next step, and all you're going to do, and I'll show you how to connect these if you're not using cable extensions, but if you are, then we're going to go ahead and start those right now. So if you are doing a build just like me, then what you're going to need is you're going to need this larger 24 pin. You're going to need 1 4-pin. If you did a different GPU like a 3070 or something like that, there might be more of these. So just make sure you verify. It's pretty easy to tell if you need more or not. And then lastly, you need this pin right here, which is for your CPU. You'll know it because it actually splits in half. This is your CPU connector, your EPS CPU connector that we're going to be using. Also inside of the bag are these. These are cable combs. This is just to make sure that the build looks very nice. Now I'm going to show you quickly how to install cable combs. I'm not going to show you how to install all of them, but I just want to give you a kind of a quick brief on how to basically figure them out. And then we'll zoom ahead to showing installing the cables. Basically see how it lines up to make sure you're going to install it right. You're going to take your cable cone and you're going to install it on the part that is facing outward. So in this case, you make sure the clip is facing down and you're going to put your cable combs on each individual part just like this. Okay, so once your cable combs are done, they should look like this. We got 3 on your 24 pin, you got 5 on your 8 pin, and then 2 on your CPU. So to install your cable extension, basically just come down to the top, plug it in right there. The second one is your GPU. What you're going to do with that one is you're going to take this, connect it in right here. And then there's a little hole right here. You're just going to slide that down there. And you're going to push one of these cable combs below the hole. And then your last one, your EPS one, you're going to go in this top corner up here. And there's an 8 pin plug that in just like this at the top. You're going to pull that one through this top left hole right here. Just like that. Okay, for this build, you're only going to need your PSU. You'll need your power cable, obviously. Inside of the bag is a bag of 4 little screws that look just like this. Your 24-pin motherboard ATX cable. This is the part that's going to go into the PSU, and this is the part that's going to go into the motherboard. In fact, it's actually labeled MB on the back for motherboard. The second cable that you need to choose when you're finding it, and I talk about this, is your CPU, and it's actually labeled CPU. Unfortunately, even though it says CPU, the part that does not split is the part that goes into the PSU. The part that does split is the part that's going to go into the motherboard, or in our case, the cable extension. Lastly, you have basically your VGA or your VGA cable. It's labeled VGA S1. You want one that does not split unless you're using more powerful GPU. The part that is not split is the part that's going to go into the PSU, and the part that does split is going to go into the GPU directly or into the cable extension like we did. So what you're going to do is you're going to take your power supply, just set your power cable off to the side. So here's your power supply. For your first motherboard connection, you'll see it up here at the top. It's going to go top here, then the side right here, so that's that one. Then you're going to take your CPU. It's literally labeled CPU right next to it. Go ahead and plug that in. Remember, not the side that splits. Let's put that in. Then we're going to run these kind of up to the top. Then where it says VGA1, we take the same thing apart. Again, not the part that split. Stick that in there and go like that. And there you go. There are all your connections for this particular build. Now, where it says SATA and peripheral, if you're installing a hard drive or if you bought an RGB AIO, this is where you'd plug in the connections for that. We want to show you that, but because this really is a step-by-step for the $1,000 build, we're not going to jump into that today. You're going to make sure that the fan is pointing down, and then you'll see why we push those cables down, just like that. That's how it sits. Then what I have a tendency to do is set it up like so. What you're going to do is screw these in. Okay, so that's all screwed in and flush. Now what we're going to do is set this down. If you're going to plug in to the motherboard directly, what you're going to do is you're going to take this cable, you're going to run it right here, and you're going to plug it directly into your motherboard. Now, because we're using cable extensions, we're not going to do that. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this, we're going to stick it in just like that. Then what we're going to do is we're going to take our one that says CPU. Now, if you were going to hook it into the motherboard, you would run it right into this top corner and plug it in just like we showed you. But in this case, because we're using a cable extension, you're just going to plug it in right here. And then I can just reach down here, grab our GPU cable. And now if you were going to plug this in to your GPU, you would just literally route it through that hole down here at the bottom, like I said. Just route it up through here, and then plug it directly into your GPU in this case. Again, this is where you plug in your motherboard if you aren't using the cable extension, and then the top left is where you're plugging in your CPU if you can't do your connection. But in this case, because we're using a cable extension, it's going to have it come right here. If you are worried about cable management, one of the things you can do is plug everything in, then power it on before you cable manage. That's always a good idea. I know I cable manage as I go. There's not a lot of cable management in this build, but if you want to save yourself a little bit of time, you can always go back and cable management after you're done. Once you're done, before you put the whole case together, just to make sure everything works, let's go ahead and test it. So let's show you the connections I hook up when I test. So my first one is obviously the PSU. Plug that in, like so, leaving the cable off. RJ45, because I want to make sure I can download updates, etc. And then the last thing is obviously my VGA. There we go. I'm going to flick this on and push this button. And just like that, the PC's on. Now the build's all set up and everything's ready to go. Couple things. First and foremost, make sure you stay tuned until the end of the video. Thanks to the team at EVGA, we'll be giving this PC away. Also, we'll be going through thermals, and we'll also run it through all of our benchmarks to see how this $1,000 build is actually going to do. Lastly, if you want to know how to set up things specifically for Windows 10, we have a whole video on how to set up this PC from end to end. If you want to do that, you can check out that video right here. Anyway, guys, let's see how this thing does thermally, let's see how this thing does in games, and then lastly, let's see how you could potentially walk away with this build for yourself. Well, I hope you enjoyed this step-by-step guide, and I hope you found it helpful, as we're going to have more of these kind of videos and step-by-step guides coming out for other important price points, so make sure you like and subscribe so you get notified when these updated step-by-step guides release throughout the year. Also, make sure you leave us any feedback in the comments below about what we can do to improve these. And remember, there's that $50 on the line. Okay, enough of the reminders. How did this little budget beast perform? Now, let's start with thermals, and one of the main reasons I chose this case to put this little bad boy into. First up, it's CPU temperatures for the 12600K cooled by the Noctua NH-U12S inside of the Fantex P368 airflow case. Kicking it off with idle temperatures, we saw things, well, let's just say things were running about as good as they could, to be honest. In the open case scenario, at idle, we saw the CPU sitting at a nice and frosty 29 degrees Celsius with a single digit jump up to 30 in the closed case scenario. Now we turned it up and really pumped the juice through those P cores and E cores, we see it pop up to a blistering 71. Yep, that's right, 71. Oh, and that was in the closed case, so open case you're looking at 68. Those aren't blistering temperatures at all, by the way. That is awesome. And given we got the K model in this bad boy, you have some pretty good headroom to overclock, even using this amazing air cooler and this awesome airflow case. So what about the GPU, Robey? How does that fare? So at idle in the open case, we're seeing that GPU sitting at a nice and frosty 35 degrees in the open case scenario and a higher jump up to 36 in the closed case scenario. Now let's start cranking out those Robey coins and giving the GPU the juice, and we see it pop up to a whopping 57. Wait, is that right? Yeah. Wow, 57. Sheesh! Oh, and by the way, that was closed case, so that's only 55 in the open case scenario. So let's just say in the temps department, this build crushes it. And you have room to get even more performance. Speaking of performance, let's talk about the games. Now, how does this little $1,000 beastie actually play games? Well, first up, let's talk about single-player NVIDIA-tuned experiences with this Intel 12600K and an EVGA RTX 3050 XE, a $259 card. For Tomb Raider running at 1080p with DLSS on the highest preset, we saw an average frame rate of 148 frames per second across the runs we did on the game. That is some solid Tomb Raiding numbers right there. For Metro Exodus, also running at 1080p, running with ray tracing on high and DLSS set to ultra performance, we saw an average FPS across our runs of 35.78 frames per second. Those are some solid console gaming numbers, and that is good enough for playing this for sure, which wasn't possible on this price point up until now, to be honest. Now for some of those AMD single-player experiences. First up, it's Dirt 5 running at 1080p with ultra-high graphic settings. We saw an average frame rate of 61.2, which is pretty good for racing and kind of a target frame rate for those games. Lastly, and rounding out the single-player experiences, with Borderlands 3 running at the highest graphical preset, we saw an FPS average of 53.85. Now, if you want to hit that 60 frame per second mark, it looks like you might need to drop things down a little bit on the graphic sides. I was a little bit disappointed here, and we're seeing the budget side a bit when it comes to AMD titles versus NVIDIA. Again, NVIDIA being obviously optimized for NVIDIA. Well, what about multiplayer games, Robey? It sounds like it's a pretty solid bag for single player. Glad you asked. Well, let's talk about Apex Legends running on low visual settings at 1080p, optimizing for competitive gameplay and high frames per second. We saw an average frame rate of, wait for it, 200.4 frames per second across our multiple game sessions. Literally zero issues here. For Call of Duty Warzone, again on low visual settings at 1080p, optimizing for competitive FPS gameplay and maximizing for frame rate, we saw 155.9. So plenty good for that budget 144Hz monitor, which you can look at down in the description below. Now finally, for Fortnite, again at 1080p on low visual settings, setting it for competitive play, we are sitting at a still very fluid and high 307.9 frames per second. Like seriously, zero issues. Okay, so finally, one brand new thing that we've tested on this build is we're also testing, can you stream and game in it, and what's the impact to performance? So guess what? We streamed and gamed using Fortnite, basically playing 3 games, 3 rounds, and we saw our average frame rate drop to 270.6. So if you are going to stream and game, you could expect about a 10 to 15% impact on your overall frame rate, but with that for Fortnite, Call of Duty, or any MP games, this machine will have 0 issues whatsoever, both streaming and gaming for an entry-level streaming PC. So there's a nice bonus right there. So Robey, what are your final thoughts? I finally have a build that I can recommend at $1,000 that is more than good enough for anyone looking to build a PC in this price range. There is even some fat, which stay tuned, we are doing an $800 build later that could be trimmed here if you'd like to get it closer to that $800 mark, but it will have some impact on frame rate and performance, given we're gonna be changing some CPUs around, etc. But even then, you could go with like not a black air cooler, maybe some less expensive RAM, you could even try even cheaper of an NVMe SSD. Again, we chose premium parts and we wanted to make sure for sure this was something that we would have no issues across the board in terms of what parts we selected. I really do hope that this video fits the needs, as we wanted to give you an updated $1,000 build, but this time include full benchmarks and performance data. And also, don't forget, you can win it. Just look down in the description below for that Gleam link that'll have some questions about some things that are inside of this video that you might have to answer, but also making sure that you like, subscribe, and leave a comment down below. And the bonus for that comment? That's right, you can win $50 by just leaving a quality comment. It can't be a, hey,
can I win a free PC, or
Can I have free stuff?
no, it has to be something either you liked or didn't like about our video to help us improve. And the best thing about it, you can walk away with $50 cash. You just need to be able to accept Venmo and PayPal. It's open worldwide, and you need to make sure that we have a way to reach you in your YouTube description. Now, we would love to know down in the comments below if you liked this video, if it covered what you needed it to feel confident in building this build, and better yet, if you actually followed the build and built the PC. Please share us that information on Twitter at Robeytech. Now, we'd love to know all of that and more down in the comments section below. Now, while you're down there, make sure you slap that subscribe button, whip that like button, and ring that notification bell so you get a notification each and every time we post a new video or go live right here on Robeytech. Have questions about this build, troubleshooting issues, or other tech-related questions? Then check out our amazing Discord server filled with other tech and PC enthusiasts that love to share their thoughts and ideas on these very subjects. Now lastly, are you looking for cheap tech? Then check out at robeytechdeals.com or at robeytechdeals on Twitter, where we have our guy Tom scouring the internet for the best deals on all things tech, from the PC components all the way to TVs and video games. Now finally, you can follow me and my team on all the socials at Robeytech everywhere. We hope you enjoyed this video. Please make sure to leave a comment, perhaps win $50, or better yet, enter in the Gleam to potentially win a $1,000 PC. And we look forward to seeing you on the next video.